All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So this idea of the last question actually is a culmination of a couple of different things I've experienced. One was obviously the movie The Fault in Our Stars. If anyone has seen that, depressing movie to say the least, very real movie, and it's a combination of that and the Google commercial from the Super Bowl. And the idea behind it is that if you notice when the elderly man was telling about the things he wanted to remember about his wife, he was asking Google to remember that. And it struck me that all too often we all live with the premise that tomorrow is another day, and that other day will always be an option when in fact sometimes it isn't. And as someone who lost my parents extraordinarily young, I looked at it like I never had the opportunity to do those questions. So what I've done is I've reached out to a bunch of friends, I've reached out to a bunch of family, and this is my son Ryan Baker here, and he has joined this, and he's going to ask questions. Now, the key here is the questions he's going to ask, I have absolutely no knowledge of what they are, so it's unscripted. And then in future episodes, the same questions will not be answered. But the idea is, if you had last questions to ask and you knew I wasn't going to be here tomorrow, what would those questions be? So, Ryan, we've kind of covered that. And I will say, I've done a lot of travel. I've done a lot of going places. And I went to a place called Varanasi in India one time. And they have things called salvation homes. And those salvation homes are where people go to die, essentially. It's not a geriatric home always. It's people who are terminal or have other illnesses, and they go there to die. And there's attendants there, and I was able to speak to one of the attendants, and one of the things that he said was that everybody who comes through there always says that the one regret that they have in their life, the main regret, is they work too hard. So keep that in mind, and we're going to go to Ryan's questions here. So go ahead, Ryan.
All right. So if it was your last day, where would you want to travel to?
The last day, where would I want to travel to? So my favorite city in the world is Barcelona. I would take all my friends and family, get to the beach, or the playa as they call it, and we'd watch people play volleyball until my last day.
Solid. All right. So what would your last words to me be?
I love you. Simple one.
That's simple. 3 words. All right. So what would you want your last meal to be?
Oh, this is a good one. So last meals, everyone who knows me knows that I'm always conflicted between Mexican food and Arthur's. I think that Arthur's Steakhouse would probably be my last meal. I'd book the whole place out. And I'd get the Arthur's, mashed potatoes, absolutely none of that nasty over-spiced pepper that goes on top of it, and probably do some garlic bread.
And do you have any regrets?
Regrets. So tomorrow's my last day. So I would probably, tough one. Regrets. Probably 2. One is work too hard, which is probably a common regret for most. And the other regret I would probably say is getting divorced, because I always wanted to have a 50th wedding anniversary. And on my second marriage, it would be a pretty extraordinary age for bakers to make it to their 50th wedding anniversary.
What would your last Facebook post be?
My last Facebook post. Interesting.
You should split it up: personal page and Morris Agent page.
Oh yeah, Morris Agent page. Well, I consider them family, so I consider them all in one. So I think, wow, last Facebook post. So let's come back to that because I have to think about that for a minute, but don't let it go.
All right. So what would you consider to be your greatest accomplishment?
Greatest accomplishment I'd have to say is producing great kids that are community servants. That's really what matters.
What's left to be done on your bucket list?
Oh, my bucket list runs deep. I have pretty steep goals. Probably the biggest bucket list right now, which is on deck for 2021, is Kilimanjaro, to get to the top before there is no ice cap.
Nice. All right. So what major life lesson would you attribute to aiding in your success?
I think loss is probably the biggest. So losing both Nadine and Wendy. I think the reason for that is you kind of picture it and say, tomorrow is another day for me, wasn't for them. So then what do you do differently about your life? And for me, I just chose to be happy. And I realized that I have a pretty limited time on this spinning ball. So you better make it happy, and you better try to learn a lesson. And the biggest lesson really was, no matter how bad things are, there's always someone who's worse. So you should be grateful for it.
True. Right, so this is kind of a spin-off question off of that, and might have a similar answer. Is what's your driving factor to wake up every morning and take on the tasks you do?
Driving factor, I think sunrise. There's something I've always thought sunrise was cool. I've always been an early riser. Time I get to reflect, time I get to think about things that matter. That drives me more than anything. I'm anxious when I go to bed because I can't wait for the next morning. So it's kind of that's the mindset around it.
And what was your biggest failure?
My biggest failure, I probably have to say divorce. Right? I mean, like I said, I wanted to make it to 50 years. It was always a goal. My parents made it to 24, and 50 seemed like a pretty lofty number. Being that most bakers pass at a very young age, I'd have to be 96 to make 50. Let's see, 2041 would be 25, which would put me at 68, which is very attainable. So I'll make 25 years. I just won't make my goal, but I think the divorce is the one.
All right, and this is the last one I have. Is did you have a mentor throughout life, and if so, who are they?
That is a continuous process. So I've had mentors for my entire life. I think if I was to pick influential ones, there was someone when I was very young. His name was Mr. Finby and Mrs. Finby, but really both of them were mentors. But they were probably the most influential people on my life outside my parents. They taught me religion, other than the religion I knew. So because they were Jewish, and we had celebrated all the holidays with them, and it was pretty amazing to learn those things from them. And then secondarily, they taught me very early on that charity. They took care of us. We didn't have a lot of money, and they would give us things and help us out. And that charity has always kept in my mind. And later on in life, I had a very good partner. His name was Kishore, excellent businessman. And he had just a way of asking a question, and the question was always so different. And that was the key, was to have those questions be valid. Okay, keep going.
Okay.
Oh, and I should say now I do have a mentor who's out in California, and we do video calls a couple times a month. His name is Sina Azari, and if anyone wants to see him, CEO accredited is his hashtag. But Sina is a bit younger than me, not much younger, but his perspective on things, the way he looks at things, is incredible. And if anyone hasn't had mentorship, you definitely need to have mentorship. And he's a part of the Tom Ferry group. And the reason why is, why waste all this beautiful time we have on this earth trying to learn things on your own when someone can fast track that mentorship? And it's kind of like what parents do in trying to tell you what to do and help you along the way.
I think that was about all of them.
Facebook posts. So I would, that's a hard one. Last Facebook post. Last Facebook post I think would be a line from the Tecumseh poem. And that would be, live your life, love your life, and beautify all things in your life. And that would be my sign out. So hopefully you guys can, let's see, I know that we had some folks. So Roy Boy, I think you can hear us now. I'll certainly entertain some questions from the group here. I'm going to bring the monitor a little bit closer so we can see it. What questions did you have? Dave, wow, there's quite a few here. And the idea of this series will be that next week, there'll be someone completely different. That one will be a friend who will ask similar questions. But the idea is we all take our next day for granted. If we all acted as though we didn't, if we all acted as though tomorrow wasn't another day, would you behave differently today? And I always go back to the Counting Crows lyric that says, what will you remember about me? And I think that if everyone kind of acted as though their last question was, that person could step in front of a bus, that person won't be there tomorrow, that fight that seemed like it meant so much really doesn't. That's the goal here, is to try to ensure that we all appreciate each other and a little bit different. So this will be re-syndicated, folks, too, so I'll have a cleaner audio at the end of the day here. All right. Thank you, everyone.